Rod Fleming in the Philippines here, and I hope that you are all well. Today I want to talk about autogynephilia specifically, and to try to help people who are having problems with it. Now, autogynephilia, as you know, is sometimes characterized as a man's love for himself as a woman. Strictly, as per Blanchard, it is a man's propensity to be aroused at the thought or image of himself as a woman.
Yes. So I have Gender Euphoria Boners. Gender Euphoria Boners. Gender Euphoria Boners.
Now, that begs a lot of questions, but first, let's have a look at what this actually is. Now, autogynephilia is actually a form of what's called autoeroticism. Right? In autoeroticism, the person who is having the erotic feelings has them about himself or herself. Now, we all indulge, or most people indulge, in some forms of autoerotic behaviour. For example, masturbation, which we all know about. Both men and women do this, and they do it from a very early age, and it's very satisfying. It's completely normal, and there's nothing to be concerned about with masturbation. I guess if you were doing it 5 or 6 times a day, then you might consider what you're doing to yourself, but for most people, it's just not an issue at all. Masturbation doesn't do anything bad. The problem is that sometimes things get intertwined into this autoerotic process, which are not very useful at all. And autogynephilia falls into that category. Now, we're still trying to figure out whether autogynephilia is actually in some way inherited, or is it in some way exposure to stimuli in the surroundings during childhood, for example, or is it something that happens a bit later on in adolescence? We're really not very sure. But what we do know, what we can say with absolute certainty, is that in nearly all cases of autogynephilia, it appears strongly at Tanner stage 4, which is the point during puberty, which is called the sperm march, and which is when the boy starts to masturbate. Okay? Very important, because at this point he has really huge levels of, very, very high levels of testosterone in his body, and he simply needs to get rid of it, you know? It's just one of these things that, you know, everybody who has been a teenage boy knows what it's like. It's just, you know, constant. And eventually it dies back a little bit and things get easier to control. And just at this point, I will say that autogynephilia does appear in a very small number of females, but we're not going to discuss those just now, because that's much more complicated and it's very, very poorly understood. In males, however, this is what actually happens. For some reason, the boy, during his autoerotic behaviour, begins to see himself as his erotic target. And you know what that is. You've heard my stuff. That is, you know, your ideal, that's your type, the girl you want, you know. He starts to see himself as conforming to that model. And when he's very young, this can perhaps be achieved because he is, as a juvenile boy, you know, when he's maybe 13 or 14 and all this starts, it's actually quite easy for a boy of that age to appear to be a girl. All he needs to do is to, you know, put on a little bit of, maybe a wig and some underwear and a little bit of makeup, and you'd be quite amazed how passing a boy of that age can be. They're just not masculinized enough for it to show. And so, yes, you will get this idea where he sees himself in the mirror, he becomes attracted to this vision that he has, he masturbates, and that is where it starts. What's happening now is that he is now reinforcing his autogynephilia. I like to think of the autogynephilia as being targeted on the autogynophilic artifact. Now, the autogynophilic artifact is just the location of the erotic target. It's an erroneous location, and that's quite hard to understand unless you understand that it is actually something inside the self that it's focused on. Ray Blanchard talks about the in role as a woman, and that's basically what it is. It's just the person playing the role of his erotic target. The problem is it can get out of hand. And what will happen typically is that boys will start having these feelings, they will be masturbating. They may be somewhat withdrawn young boys, they may be perhaps somewhat shy, have poor social skills. They might possibly tend to overdo gaming online, perhaps a little bit of gaming addiction, other online forms of addiction. When they start to masturbate, typically they will become very addicted, or strongly addicted, to the process while as appearing to themselves as a woman. And then they will do really terrible things. It's bad enough that you're masturbating to yourself, to the idea of yourself as a girl. I mean, that's just not helpful. You are not a girl. An autogynephile is not a girl. This is a heterosexual male we're talking about here. And that's why the artifact has to be a girl. It's important to understand this concept of the artifact. This is a heterosexual male. He can't be aroused by another male. He really can't. I mean, yeah, okay, so adolescent boys fool around together all the time and parents don't know about it, but that's not the same as being attracted. That's just, figuring out what bits do. We're talking about real attraction here. A heterosexual male cannot be attracted to a heterosexual male. That's axiomatic. And he is a heterosexual male. So the artifact has to be a girl, has to be a woman. So the first problem is you have just created an imaginary woman who is your erotic target, which you're masturbating to, which you're somehow sexually satisfying yourself to the image of. And it's not always, dressing up in front of a mirror. Sometimes other methods are used. Autogynephilia is extremely complex. We'll go into that another time. However, typically what happens is that the boy gets completely hooked on this. It becomes like, he's constantly running off to masturbate. I mean, this is not uncommon. Teenage boys do this a lot. So you just have to, accept that. But most teenage boys are basically masturbating to images of other people, and they realize that they're other people. It could be, if they're a gay boy, it could be a man, but in most cases they'll be imagining a woman, but it's a woman who's outside themselves. I mean, they know they're not that woman. They're just imagining themselves being in sexual contact with that woman. And this is a really big difference in autogynephilia, because, in fact, in autogynephilia, the one person plays both roles. He plays both lover and beloved. It's really catastrophic, So he's got himself that he now been throwing the sexual reward at this artifact, and the next thing he does makes it even worse. He gives it a name. And that is really, really, really stupid thing to do, because it's now given it it's almost like a pseudo-person. It's got a name. When we talk about, when you're talking about how to influence people and maybe writing press releases and things like that, you always use people's names. You always give them a name. The classic one is the serial killer who has kidnapped a girl. Well, you never talk about the girl. You never talk about the doctor. The daughter. You talk about Jane or Emma or whatever her name is. You personalize her. You make her real as a person. Hopefully, so that the person who's threatening her begins to feel sympathy for her, because he identifies her now as a person. The autogynephile does exactly the same thing when he gives his artifact a name. Quite often not always, but quite often this artifact will have a really bizarre name. I remember coming across one autogynephile. Of course, he was in total denial, but never mind. And he had called himself, if I remember correctly, Sophia de la Von Triche, which is just a non-existent, ridiculous melange of several languages, none of which he spoke. And that's how weird it gets. It gets to be this exotic, wonderful, imaginary person, this wonderful, so superbly sophisticated that she has this bizarre name that just doesn't mean anything, but never mind, That's the first mistake. That is if you could avoid doing that, you would probably avoid having an awful lot of trouble. I'll be quite honest with you. If you could avoid naming this bloody thing, because you personalize it, you make it real as soon as you do that. And it's not real. It's a figment of your imagination if you're an autogynephile. And the next thing they'll do is they'll move it forward. Now, the one that we know best, most people know of best, is the transvestic form, where the autogynephile appears as a woman, dresses as a woman, grows hair long, puts on makeup, usually a disaster, that sort of thing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't work, just depends on the person's natural bone structure, really, and also their age. I mean, again, someone who starts doing this at 14 or 15, and if they're taking hormones to suppress masculinization, actually has a very good chance of passing and growing up to be able to pass as a woman. They might be a bit tall, might be a bit big, but at the end of the day, yeah, they've stopped masculinization early enough such that by the time they're 25, yeah, it's fine, they can pass. Unfortunately, traditionally in the West, this didn't happen, and it does look like things are going to get worse, which means that they're going to go back to transitioning in their 20s and their 30s, and the classic, average age 43, which is catastrophic. It's just really not possible for a male of 43 to pass as a woman. I'm sorry, it just isn't. Unless that male has been taking HRT for the last 20 years or so. More, in fact, 30 years in this case. So it's not simple like that. You've got to understand that a lot of things weigh on it. In the West, resistance to male feminization is really, really high. It's a very transphobic culture. And so it takes a lot more for men who have autogynephilia to come out, whereas in Asia it's not so bad. Here it's like, fine, you want to be a girl, be a girl. Just means you can't be a guy. If you don't want to be a guy, so what? Fine, go and join a beauty contest. Get your rocks off that way. And they do. They do it fine. Some of the most beautiful pageant winners in the Philippines are actually autogynephilic. Their bodies are pumped full of silicone. They've been on hormones I don't know how long. They've got I don't know how much facial feminization surgery, but at the end of it all, they're happy. They're managing to have a life. We're talking here about people who can't do that. And typically in the West, there's no opportunity for you to do that. So the worst thing you can do is to give it a damn name and make it worse. And then what they'll do is typically they'll go and buy some clothes. Or if it's the kind that are more physiological, they might like to imagine themselves in panty liners, so they buy panty liners and pee in them, which is true. Or they might be the kind who like to feel themselves having sex as a woman, in which case this is a kind of behavioural and interpersonal form. And they maybe like to use dildos on themselves or other toys on themselves. All of these are simply reinforcing the artifact. It's making it stronger. Every time that you turn it on and you give it this, you're making it worse. So what I would say is, if you're the kind of person who thinks that this is absolutely fabulous and you love it, I have nothing to say. I mean, good luck. Go ahead. I'm not a conversion therapist. I can't help you with it, but there are gazillions of counsellors out there just waiting to take your money to turn you into a pseudo-woman. I'm interested in helping the people who do not want to go down that path. The people who actually still know that they're men and who want to be men. They want to have a normal family life, and they want to defeat this autogynephilia. And make no mistake, it can be defeated. Do not listen to the people who say that it can't. The people who say it can't are those who lost. So of course, misery loves company, so oh no, you can't possibly fight it, you will lose, just because they lost. That is not true. That is not true. There is no harm in fighting autogynephilia. It will not cause you harm. It will not cause you to commit suicide to fight this condition. It won't. There are loads and loads of men who went through their entire lives with autogynephilia and they managed it. They just managed it. I'm fairly sure you can't completely get rid of it once you've spent all that time in your adolescence, nurturing it and suckering it and making it as strong as it is, but you can put it on a chain and you can keep it there. And I will try to help. If you contact me on my email is rodfleming@gmail.com or, through my website, the contact form there, that's rodfleming.com. Contact me through this channel if you like, and I will try to help you. It's hard work. It will be hard work. You're going to have to make a real effort. Especially if you're already at the point where you've bought clothes, you've moved down that line, you're appearing in public, you're getting very close to the point of no return. And there is a point of no return. If you get so deep down this particular rabbit hole, you can't get out again. You can only really manage it if you start early, when you're still able to function as a man, where you can control the artifact, because that's what you're going to have to do, is control it. And it is just you being a man. No, you be a man, be masculine, take control. This is a pseudo-woman, it's not even a real woman. And you're going to let this control your life? Please, have a word with yourself. No. That's not what you need to do. Like I say, we're not talking about HSTS here. We're not talking about sexual inverts. We're talking about heterosexual males who develop a paraphilia. It's a paraphilia. That's all it is. And if you want to fight it, there are ways to fight it, and I will try to help you. Okay, sayonara for now.